Everyone has their own passion. Some people like film or art or company or murder, but none of those things are for me. Especially not that last one. Yikes. No, my passion is food. Yes, food. One of the only two things we need to survive, yet one of the key things that we take for granted. It doesn't just have to exist for sustenance sake, it can be artful, revolutionary even. Along with the written word or visual art, food is one of the greatest mediums of expression we have as a human race, and I can't imagine my life without it. It all started when I was a small child. While I wasn't a particularly small child on average, I was actually quite large. Now that I think about it, probably because of my love of food. Huh. But I mean when I was young. Okay, I'm still young, but you get the point. My parents loved spoiling me rotten, and one of the key ways they did this was through food. It was always a key family get-together whenever we went out to eat, and it's not like the occurrence was rare by any means. Sometimes we went upscale and made a reservation weeks in advance to spend what had to be a month's paycheck on just one meal. Other times we only looked at whatever the number one ranked hipster food joint place was in the Westward. Growing up, I never really noticed a difference. It was all food to me. As I grew up, however, my taste became more refined. I grew to hate simple fast food places if they were utilized for anything other than a road trip, and possibly some dark times in college, but we don't talk about those days. My ramen addiction has gotten better, thank you very much. The higher-end places that we were only able to go on special occasions became my own local hangout spots, and damn was that an expensive realization. Can't exactly take out all my friends to a steak dinner every night after work unless the work we're doing is very boring and not at all food-related. All I wanted was a job in food, so this wouldn't really work out. I was down on my luck for a few years, resorting to eating out of the garbage of all things. While personally insulting to me, it opened my eyes as to the quality of food that people were just throwing away all the time. I even found a whole cake once, and from what I could make out, the only problem was that whoever made the frosting decorations must have failed third-grade spelling tests. That and some indigestion afterwards, but that might have had more to do with the strange green glowy substance that was next to it. Whatever, I'm still alive, it's not important. What was important was I needed to find a job, and fast. I couldn't live like this forever, after all. Fortunately, while I was on the streets, I made some connections with the local mob. The boss was a guy by the name of Carcetti. Didn't sound like much of a mob boss to me, but this wasn't the guy that you really said that kind of thing to. That is to say, I've met him a few times. Hey, a guy has a lot of free time when he's jobless. Slowly becoming friends with the leader of a local drug syndicate seems like as good a pastime as any, right? Anyway, we talked one day about my situation, which seemed to come up often. I think it was the smell, and he said that he had a position open as a cook. Best part was I wouldn't even have to kill anyone. But there was just one problem. I had absolutely no idea how to cook. It's just one of those things I never had any time to learn how to do, like learning to knit or hide a body. Anyway, I knew this would come as about as much of a shock to him as it probably did to you just now, so I didn't tell him. This was probably a bad decision, but what can I say? I'm kind of good at those. Thing is, I didn't really have too much of a problem learning the ropes. Turns out the mob has a pretty serious following in the kitchen, and even though I wasn't about to tell anyone that I didn't know what I was doing, I must be a pretty quick learner. Pretty soon I was making soups and putting together some neat spreads like I was one of the pros. Which I guess, since I was getting paid for it, I was. And boy, was that the best part. I had spending money now, money that I could spend on those fancy restaurants that I had talked about. Not that the place Carcetti had me working at was one of those places, but I think he paid me extra to hush up about some of the stuff he would tell me on our weekend hangouts. I certainly wasn't complaining about it, not that I would have told anyone anyway. Point is, now I had cash. What I didn't have was friends. Well, besides Carcetti, but he doesn't really count. He was always busy doing something or another, and I don't think he really would have liked that scene anyways. All the rest of the people I worked with hated food at the end of the day in the kitchen, and that was just a deal-breaker for me. I have only one passion, and it wasn't lying to people about what that passion is. Make sense? Probably not, but whatever, we're moving on. This would all change one night as I was walking back to my little spot behind the dumpster, because I wasn't spending any of my restaurant money on a house or anything like that, of course, and I see this angel coming out of the fog. She had the face of an angel anyway, but once I introduced myself, I found out that she wasn't exactly the holy type. She threw about 40 swear words into her own introduction, and said her name was Maxine. Maxine loved to hear herself talk, and so did I. She used to do this thing where when she finished a story, she threw her head back like she was going to laugh, but no sound ever came out. Whenever she did that, it drove me crazy in a way that nothing besides a nicely prepared plate of mashed potatoes ever had. Thing is, she liked food about as much as I did. She'd never been able to get a job doing anything about food like I had, but she was trying. She'd been stuck out of culinary school for about a year, and nobody would accept her into the kitchen or any sort of higher education, so she was, like I said, stuck. It was a shame because she had quite a knack for what she was doing, as I found out later. So I decided to risk it all and introduce her to Carcetti. Might not have been the best idea, though. See, I had known her for a few months before this, and she seemed legit to me. She wouldn't sell me out or any of my friends for that matter. In fact, she actually didn't, not technically anyway. Things went great for the first few hours of our meeting. Carcetti started off a bit suspicious, but the amount Maxine was willing to tell him about herself opened him up a little bit. I hadn't heard him talk about the business to anyone besides me before, but he was telling her all about it. It was when he got to the part about throwing some poor guy into the Chatfield Reservoir with his own 2 hands, he loved saying stuff like that, that things went awry. She whipped out a pistol and told him he was under arrest. She also pulled out a mic pack from her pocket and told him he was done for. He'd go away for a long time, the whole spiel. Funny thing was, Carcetti had a gun of his own, and he was much quicker with it. They both got some good shots off, and even though I was pretty quick to hide myself behind the overturned table that we had set up for the meeting and help myself to some fries, I still got a good chunk of metal in my arm. I was able to get it patched up later, under the condition that I tell the public everything. Turns out, just as many doctors know cops as cooks know mob bosses. That's about the end of it. Managed to avoid getting sent to jail or anything like that myself, and Carcetti was a little too dead to be shipped off somewhere himself. Maxine went back to San Francisco or something, because apparently she didn't have the mic on. The news spun it like she fired on Carcetti before he pulled anything, so she was chastised for it and had to go home. I'm a little bitter that she lied to me, but she makes good food, so we stay in touch. Maybe someday something will happen there, I don't know. But that's what happened, down to the detail.